Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special returning guest, Kacey Ezell. Kacey, how are you doing today?
I'm awesome. Thanks. How are you?
I'm great. I feel like we're warmed up now. It's so funny. I was just talking to Andrew and a couple people, like Marisa and Melissa and stuff, and Chris, like after the interview and stuff. And I know we
hmm
chatted too, right? But like after, but it was just so funny. Like Andrew's like, wow, there's like a lot of post stuff. I was like, oh yeah, I thought I was gonna be able to go to bed after that. It was like 2.5 hours of like posts,
Nice.
just like stuff. So it was wild.
Just
So I was always, my friend was talking about it, and Chris and I were saying like we need to do like a behind the scenes of podcasting or being an author or any creator,
yeah,
right? Because everybody only sees this; they don't see like the before, during, and after.
yeah.
So to me, it's always funny with stuff like that. But I'm so glad that we can have you back on, to talk about Magelight in particular, but just to kind of get like you, Marisa, and Melissa, just some solo interviews and stuff like that. I am looking really forward to talking to the three of you. So that's like my next thing to set up in
I'm
terms of like
excited
a
about that
live or
too.
something like that. Yeah, I'm really
Yeah.
stoked. So if anybody wants to check out the Feral Chaos Takeover on the station or the other one, like we're gonna have like a joint thing where the ladies are gonna talk, about a bunch of cool stuff that and their books in particular and experiences. So I'm just really excited to get the three of you together for that. But yeah, I'm so excited that I could get each of you in terms of a solo one before then. So that's really
Uh,
cool. I just want to remind our audience though that Kacey and one of her co-authors, Marisa Wolf, we actually had an interview previously this season for. So please make sure you check that out. We had a blast. I learned a lot during that one. So please make sure you check that out because I think that's going to be a really good one for co-authors. Like we said during the interview, you guys are like do things very differently, I would say, than like when I had like some other co-authors on, even like some husband and wife teams. So for me, it's always cool to to talk to people in terms of co-authors, together, but also like individually just to get those
yeah.
other different things and different strategies in there. But thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming back.
Every
Yeah,
Oh, you're welcome. I was just going to say every partnership is different, and then even within the
true
same
that.
partnership, every project is different, right? It's just
That's
it,
true.
it just depends on the vibe. So, yeah, it's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah. It's very fair. Well, in case people, like I was saying, in case people, have not watched our first interview, you should go watch it with her and Marisa and
You
myself.
should.
It was really good. But in case you haven't, all right, Kacey, what has your writing journey been like really up until this point?
It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. I started writing professionally in about 2010. But prior to that, I had always sort of made up stories and written stories, like even from being like a little kid. And then when I was, and I read a lot too, right? So those two things are really tightly intertwined in my life. And when I was little, I read the Dragon Riders of Pern series by Anne McCaffrey and became obsessed and wanted nothing more than to be a dragon rider. So, as a very logical 9-year-old about kid, my dad took me to an air show at one point and was like, and I looked and watched the demo teams performing. Was like, you know what? That's kind of like a dragon. And so I told my dad when I was 9, I was like, I'm gonna go be a pilot, and he was like, you're gonna do what now? So, um, but that's what I did, and so I was always inspired by great fantasy and science fiction stories, in particular the Dragon Riders of Pern, and but others too, right? And so when I was in college, I discovered the wild world of online Pern fan fiction back in the day, where a lot of it was hosted on like AOL forums or
Oh yeah,
AOL
yeah, yeah.
boards. I don't remember the name of it, but I know I'm totally
Yeah.
dating myself, but I don't care. You guys can know how old I am. And I got, that was like a whole, like a revelation to me, right? Because finally I could like, you know, actually create stories in this world that I love so much with, my own characters that I would make up. And it was sort of, I mean, it was a lot of self-insert, right? Like fan fiction generally is a lot of like, what would it be like if I was actually chosen to, try and impress a dragon and all that kind of stuff. And I got really into it. And it was a really great way to develop a lot of my writing skill in terms of character development, character creation, character development, and character driven storylines, right? Because in that particular milieu of specifically Pern fan fiction, you could never use any of Anne's actual characters. They were all your own original characters.
Interesting.
That was per her legal guidance, right? Like she was like, I don't care if you want to write in my backyard, but you may not use. I will sue if you use my characters, and you may not use certain settings, right? Um,
Yeah.
and it was just a way for her to protect herself and her family
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
her intellectual property. I get it, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so no arguments there, but what it did was, it sort of taught me a lot about those things. What it didn't do was teach me a lot about world building, so I had to learn that part of the craft elsewhere, which was
Yeah.
fine. But yeah, I to this day my fiction remains very character driven fiction, and that's why. So um, and then it also funny that you brought up Marisa earlier. That's actually where I met Marisa. Was we were writing Pern fan fiction together, not on
Oh, yeah.
AOL boards. This By this point those had died, and we were mostly doing it like through email, where we would email parts of the story to each other. But that's where we met, and first became acquaintances, and then friends, and then kind of like obsessively codependent with each other. As we are now. So yeah, she's pretty much my bestie, and it's awesome. She's really talented and a lot of fun to write with. Um so that did I get off topic a little bit? I did, didn't I? So
I was
so
assuming
back
that
to
was gonna be brought
2010.
up anyway.
So back to 2010. I was actually deployed to Iraq because I was on active duty in the Air Force at the time, and I was deployed to Iraq, and I had made friends with a guy by the name of John Ringo, who's a really well-known military science fiction author. He and I had become friends a couple years earlier, and we'd stayed in touch and corresponded. And he knew that I wrote, and he knew that I had an academic background in creative writing, which I do. And he was editing an anthology for Baen Books that was military science fiction written by military veterans. And he reached out to me and said, "Do you have anything?" And I was like, "No, but I could." And so 24 hours later, I sent him the draft of what became my first published sale, which was Light. And it's not under my current name because this is before I married my husband, but it's there in the Citizens anthology,
Okay.
edited by John Ringo and Brian S. Thompson for Baen Books. Yeah, so that was my first pro sale, and then through that, and through working with John, he a few years later invited me to submit another short story to his zombie apocalypse anthology, and I did so, and that brought me to the attention of Chris Kennedy and Mark Wandery from Chris Kennedy Publishing, and they invited me into to contribute something to the Four Horsemen universe, which is their big shared world military science fiction universe, and it just sort of things just sort of grew from there. So
That's super cool. You guys got some great
yeah.
ideas there. I downloaded a bunch of books. I like totally remembered the other day after I talked to Marisa, I was like, dang it, I forgot 2 or 3 of them. So I was like, go back through. My wife's like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? I was like, I just interviewed some friends and online, and she's like, oh, so you're going to buy their books now? I was like, guilty,
Well, thank
guilty.
you. Thank you for buying our books. We appreciate it.
That was like the other day. Like I was like, oh, I gotta go pre-order Melissa's book, and then I was
Oh, it's
like,
so
I
good,
went to
dude.
go do it, and I had already done it like 2 months earlier.
Nice. Nice.
But I got
Have you
Rise from
started it
Ruin,
yet?
guys. So no, well,
Yeah.
actually, I got to like
Oh,
I started it, and then my son was just like not having it last night. So,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, I'm like really excited about that. I'm adding it to my summer reads because like I had
Oh,
so many I've like crushed, which has been nice for my podcast and my like
yeah.
2025 list. But there's just at a point like I like Da Wong's like first lead on there. Like I have like book 3. I just just sometimes I just need palate cleansers. So
Yeah.
I just feel lately I've like crushed so many that I'm just like, okay, I just gonna insert some. So yes, I have yours. I made sure I have Rise from Ruin on there. I can't remember what I had for Marisa.
Rise from
Oh, like
Ruin is
the
gonna do.
yeah, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say my Reese's is the Valkyrie one. I don't know why I'm blanking.
Oh,
It's like
Valkyrie's Chosen. Yeah, super
thank you,
good.
Valkyrie Chosen. Yeah, yeah.
That one's really like snarky and funny. If that's what you're looking
Oh,
for a
perfect.
palate cleanser, that one's a really good one.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But
That's my
what I
buddy of me in a
started,
nutshell. So
yeah, what I started to say was that Rise from Ruin is going to do for some other little girl what the Dragon Rise
That's
of Pern did for
cool.
me. Like that,
That's cool.
I stand by this. That book is going to make some little girl or boy, right? Like I don't want to be sexist about it, but
Oh yeah, I love
it's going to
Dragon
make
Rise
some,
of Pern. It was amazing.
some kid's going to read it and be like, I want to be a Griffin rider, and that's going to send
Yeah,
them
yeah,
to to go and learn how to fly helicopters or
yeah, yeah.
airplanes or whatever else. But yeah, it's
That's super cool.
it's awesome. Such a good book.
That's awesome. You know, I realized after like our interview, like our joint interview with Marisa, I was talking to Melissa about this with our individual one, and I was like, I didn't realize it until I got talking with Casey and Marisa, but I was like, I totally wrote Forgotten Realms fan fiction or like Dragonlance fan
Yeah, yeah,
fiction, like it totally, you know what I mean? Like I was like, that's what my first stuff was. I don't know why I like forgot about that, you know, but it was totally. I
yeah,
never considered it fan fiction, but it totally was. I was like, I came to
yeah.
that realization the other day. So yeah, but it definitely
Do you
definitely
know
was very
who?
helpful. So.
Do you know who Shannon Maguire is? She's fairly well
Oh yeah,
known.
I interviewed Shauna in
Yeah,
actually season one. I that was like my shoot for the stars person, and I had talked to her so much on like Twitter and stuff at the time, and I was just
yeah,
loving all of her stuff, and
yeah.
yes, I had her on, and oh my God, like I barely asked any questions because she
She,
just dropped so much knowledge in that hour and a half, like it was wild.
she, she has a great quote, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it's something about how writing fan fiction is like one of the best, sort of like sink or swim, trial by fire
Mm,
laboratories for learning certain parts of the craft of writing,
yeah,
particularly those things I mentioned, right? Like character development and how to how to marry up a character arc with the plot and have the characters decisions be the thing driving the plot forward and things like that, because it's a community. You get into this community and you want to you want to create something for the members of your community. You want them to love and appreciate it and stuff. So there's that, I don't want to say pressure, but there's that drive to to really give it your best, and the community is very good about helping, at least the community I was involved with. I It's probably not universal, unfortunately.
Star
But
Wars
the
wasn't
clubs
as
I was,
much.
yeah, yeah, but the clubs I was involved with, like, we did so much co-authoring and co-writing and
That's
having our
cool.
characters interact with one another, that you got better simply by writing with other people. So yeah, it's I forget what exactly how she phrased it, but it was perfect. It was like it's one of the best laboratories in the world for learning writing. And then she's like, "Come at me, bro." Because Shannon's a little she's unfazed.
Yeah. I would tell you she'll throw all 50 books, that she wrote the last several years at you while you're trying to come at her, but they're good
Yeah,
reads.
yeah,
Come
she's
on, guys. Yeah, she's so good. So even like her comic stuff, I was just like, oh my goodness. Like, yeah, it was super, super cool. There's actually a couple
yeah,
that I'm trying to track down still that she was talking about. But yeah, she dropped some knowledge in that one. So I recommend people. I think it was like season one, 33 or something like that. Yeah, I
yeah,
23, I had a blast. My friend goes, how'd you get a New York Times bestselling author? I go, I don't know. I just asked politely, and she said, yeah, and she came and just we talked about
yeah,
so much cool stuff that the time went by so fast. Yeah, and it's just me
yeah.
like like just listening.
Just
So you guys
soaking
go
it
take
in,
a
just
look at
talking
her.
to
Yeah,
me.
like a seminar. Yep. It was really awesome.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's just awesome. But we talked a lot about dragons and just like cool stuff. Anne McCaffrey by
yeah,
far, like Ursula K. Le Guin, and then Anne McCaffrey. Like, oh my God, I just discovered them at such a time where it was just like I absolutely
yeah,
loved all of their books. Like, it was very,
yeah.
formative, right? Yeah, like,
Same.
and I had
Yeah. I
never,
mean,
yeah,
obviously, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah. But I just had never considered, um, and my friends were all like, "Oh, you don't really read fantasy." I'm like, "No," and I'm like, "Dragon Rise of Pern." She, was like, "Oh, it's sci-fi," and
It
so
is
I'm like,
sci-fi. Yeah.
right. So everyone's like, "You read fantasy?" I didn't read fantasy till later, but I read,
Yeah.
Dragon Rise of Pern, and I liked
Yeah.
fantastical elements, but because of her writing, right? And
Yeah.
so for me, like Ursula Le Guin was like one of the first fantasy authors besides T.A. Barron's like his Merlin series. Those were the first ones I had
Mm-hmm.
ever really encountered that was like I would say like straight fantasy.
Yeah.
But yeah, like talk about character driven
Yeah.
goals, right? Goals. But yeah,
Yeah.
those are
Right.
great.
For sure. For
Well,
sure.
speaking of books. and great
Yeah,
books. So, what is your book
thanks.
Magelight about, and how'd you come up with this idea? By the way, I can't get over the cover. Like, I can't get
Oh,
over
I
it.
love
That's one
this
of my
cover.
favorite covers this year. Yeah. But
Yeah.
what is your book about, and how'd you come up with this idea?
Well, since you mentioned the cover, let me just say the cover artist is Sam R. Kennedy, and he's a master. He's so good, and I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to work with him. I've actually worked with him on several books. I think he did five covers of my books in the last like year because he did Mage Light, he did the 1919 Romanov Rising, which I co-wrote with Tom Kratman and Justin Watson. And then he also did the covers for my Ashes of Anticia series. So no, that's gosh, that's more than that. Because there's
I was
five
gonna say,
books.
yeah.
That's eight books.
Wow,
so
I didn't
so we've
realize
worked
that.
together on eight books. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, wow.
So obviously I'm a big Sam Kennedy fan.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
so, but
It's
yeah,
fair.
so Mage Light is the story of Alyssa Brion, who is a young noblewoman from a powerful magical family, and she's graduating from like magical sorcerer college. But the problem is that she all her life has been told she's not good enough because she's just not powerful enough. She can't do big magic, um, and when you're told that all your life, it's really, really hard not to believe it, right? But still, she kind of holds on and holds to this dream that she has of being a battle mage, even when like everyone in her life is telling her, "Hey, like you got to be realistic. You know this isn't going to work for you. Like you need to do something else." But she perseveres, and because she perseveres, she ends up being betrayed pretty big by her best friend and her boyfriend, and getting her heart broken. And so she essentially decides, as one does, well, f this, and takes off and decides, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go make my own choices about my life. And she runs off into the night, attempting to go home. She's but she's a naive noblewoman riding a horse by herself at night through bandit infested woods, and that goes about as well as you would expect. And she ends up in trouble, and fortunately for her, she ends up in trouble in a location where there also happen to be these three men who grew up together, were separated by tragedy, and which I go into in the book, and then have recently found each other and decided that they're going to go into business together, basically as adventurers. And one of them sees Alis in trouble and ends up rescuing her. And so she's like, "Hey, obviously I need some help getting home. Can I hire you guys to take me home?" And they've just decided that this is exactly what they're going to do, for their business. So they take the job. But then, weirdly, the bandits that were chasing her didn't just give up and run away. They come back and like seem real determined to get their hands on this girl, and we're not really sure why. And so they do some shady shit and shady stuff, and basically burn down the inn that they're all staying in, and they're all gonna die there. Like it's
Mm,
done. There's no way out. And Alice does something that she didn't know she could do, and does some big magic stuff, and all of a sudden, basically levels the inn and everything around it, and accidentally in the process bonds these three dangerous, capable, pretty sexy men to her through her magic. But she didn't mean to. It was accidental, and she doesn't really know what to do with it. And so the rest of the story is the four of them dealing with this magical bond, and the conflicting feelings that it creates amongst them, and trying to figure out what's real, what's magic. Do I really care about this girl, or is it just that I'm being forced to because she has this magical hold over me, um, all while trying to get her home, avoiding attacks by bandits who just keep showing up, which is so weird, as well as these like creepy goblin ant creatures in the forest and stuff. So it's basically my take on a D&D fantasy adventure party's origin story, with a little bit of why choose romance thrown in, because that's the kind of stuff I like. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's super cool. So
yeah.
it's so funny because you and another author that I was just talking to, like, kind of took that. I always think about this for D&D, right? Where like spells, like where Because like Baldur's Gate 2 in particular, like Shadows of it seems like everybody was always trying to feeble mind you or, to control your mind, right? And
Hmm.
to tell you what to do. So I always wonder though, like, you know how it works in the game aspect, right? But you always wonder like how you would actually write those kind of spells and things. So to
Hmm.
me, it's so interesting because the two of you like did that type of like a similar spell, but really wrote it into a story with the characters and how it affects them like really
Yeah.
differently. So I'm kind of curious like where did that come into play for you, that they were going to have this type of bond and where those questions were going to pop up because that's just really
Yeah.
cool. That's really fun.
So, so I mentioned that I loved, reverse harem romances, right? Those are, I'm a big fan. That's a lot of my popcorn reads are those type of romances. And if you're not familiar with the term, it basically means there's one female main character who has multiple male love interests, and she gets to enjoy them all at the same time. She doesn't have to choose. And uh, yeah, for the various definitions of all at the same time. So.
Oh, sorry. I forgot some of you might not know that term. Sorry.
um,
I
so
appreciate you on a Friday explaining Casey because yeah, I don't know why I just assumed that people would know that today.
well, I mean, it's, yeah, yeah, it's not a part of everyone's experience, and that's totally fine, right? And so
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, it's
enjoy
crazy.
these types of stories because I find the character interaction, the emotional interactions between all these characters, I find those really interesting. And my favorite types of those are the ones um, where it's, all of the men are interested romantically in the woman, but they don't necessarily have romantic interest in each other, and yet they have a very strong non-romantic, non-sexual love for one another, right? Which a lot of times happens in the form of like a brothers in arms kind of bond, or like some sort of like, hey, we've been through major trauma together, we kept each other alive type situation, which is basically the same thing. um but I my favorite of those stories are ones that explore those different nuances of, there's romantic sexual love, but then there's also non-romantic non-sexual love, and they're not any less strong or more strong because of those elements. They're just different, they just are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um
Okay.
and um and so um so I enjoy, like, I enjoy reading explorations of that. Now the thing of it is though, is that, and this is a generalization, I recognize that there are people who do, live this way, and more power to you if you can. But for the most part, most, what we would consider like strong alpha men aren't real big on sharing their female partner with other dudes. That's just not the way that we're socialized, and there are arguments to say that's not the
Yeah,
way
yeah.
that we're wired as animals, right? um
Yeah, yeah.
so the question was, well, what would be a mechanism that would override that instinct of, I need to be exclusive with this woman, I need her to be exclusive to me, um and still, and still have that sort of like strong brotherhood bond. And the answer was magic, right? But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
then that raises all kinds of really interesting questions of like choice and consent, and like,
Yeah.
is this a real attraction that I feel, or have I been magically roofied,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
so
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so those were all themes I wanted to, that I wanted to explore, and that I end up exploring, within the storyline of Magelight. And since I was talking about magic, it, the my favorite heroes in stories are always those like super uber competent like men who are, they're really good at what they do, right? Like, this is the part. So my friends Melissa, Marisa, and I have a joke that every time I do a podcast, I go on the internet and tell the internet how much I like my husband. So so here we go, internet. I'm a real big fan of my husband. He's awesome. And he's one of those like hyper competent dudes, right? Like, if he's going to do something, he's just going to do it well. Even if he has to learn first, right?
Yeah.
And that gets me, man. That does it for me. Hyper competent dudes. And so I, when I was thinking about, this structure of like, okay, so I've got multiple hyper competent dudes who are magically bound to this one woman, it sort of naturally took the shape and the form of an adventuring party. And a lot of that is because I'm a gamer, right? I love playing fantasy role playing games. We have a Marisa and I are part of an in-person D&D group that meets every month pretty religiously. And we roll dice around my dining room table, old fashioned style, and it's one of the highlights of my month every single time, just because it's so much fun to get together and do that.
Yeah,
When I go play video games as a form of creative rest, which I highly advocate if you're any type of creative person, not necessarily using video games, but find something that is creative, that is not the thing that you're doing
oh
to
yeah,
allow your brain to sort of recharge. For me, a lot of times it's video gaming, and it's always RPGs, right? Like, I just started a playthrough of the remastered Oblivion because I loved Skyrim, but I never played
so
Oblivion,
jealous.
and it's so fun, dude.
I have to
It's so
finish my
fun.
novella first. Casey, I gotta finish. I promised myself I would not do it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm dying right now.
Oh, it's so
Like
much fun.
I'm having withdrawals of oblivion.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I love that, right? I love the structure of, okay, it's the fantasy quest, or we're going after the magical MacGuffin, or we're going to, rescue the person who's been taken, or whatever it is in this fantasy environment. But I also really love, my favorite part of playing D&D and of a lot of these games has always been the interpersonal, interparty dynamics of the
Yeah.
relationships between them. So it just keeps coming back to that, right? Like, I'm a writer who writes, like, my whole tagline is I write emotionally charged adventure, fantasy, and science fiction, because I'm a writer who was really interested in the emotional connections between characters, and between the characters and the reader, and the characters and the writer, and the writer and the reader. Those are the things that just, they do it for me. Them
Yeah,
and
that makes
competent
sense.
dudes.
Yeah. I do too. Maybe not sexually, but I do. Like my
Yeah.
friends, you just saying that, and I'm like, God dang, I'm like,
Yeah.
like every single one. I don't have a lot of like really good friends, right? Like I'm just like, I got like six, right? And I just started
Yeah.
thinking about it. I was like, they're my adventuring party, right? Like they are
Yeah.
all super competent in their own way or whatever, but like
Hmm.
they like know their stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
because it annoys the crap out of me for some reason when my male counterparts that I'm friends with just make me do all the things, you know? So having them
Yeah.
come and, add to the party, so to speak,
Yeah.
like makes me feel better, And
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm like, hey, can you do this? They're like, oh yeah, and they do it well instead of me having to like go. I'm like, oh, I guess I'll do it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I totally get that. I could totally see like for sure like that would be, yeah, that's like a thing. So I
Yeah.
too have that with my buddies. So yeah, that makes total
Well,
sense.
it's funny because I'm about to tell you something that might get me kicked out of the Sisterhood of Women, but here we go. I'm a pretty competent individual myself, right? Like, I'm, a retired military officer. I can fire a weapon, I can fly a helicopter, I can drive a car, I can move heavy shit. I'm pretty strong physically. Um, and I also, like, I love surrounding myself with interesting, competent people as well. Case in point, Marisa Wolf, right? She's a former executive in a education nonprofit. Like, she speaks boardroom like nobody's business. She's an incredible writer. She's just super, super smart. And she and I were talking. I might get in trouble. She might get mad at me for this. But she and I were talking about how, like, here we are, these high powered, go get 'em alpha female women. And we'll be like sitting on the couch being like, baby, can you bring me my water, please? And he's like,
My wife does that all the
why
time. She
can't,
goes, "Can you
why,
open this jar?"
why can't you get it? It's like, I can, but you're
You need me.
here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But that's the thing, is that we do need you. We do need our husbands,
Yeah.
right? It's so yeah, like I said, I'm probably getting ejected from the Sisterhood of Women here, right? But we do, because it's like, I don't know, it's the take care of me thing, right? Like,
Yeah,
even
yeah,
though
yeah.
if push came to shove, could I take care of myself? Absolutely.
Yeah,
Could I
yeah.
take care of my kids? Absolutely. Do I want to do it by myself? Absolutely not.
Yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah,
so come be my partner and please bring me my water.
yeah. Ah, I opened that jar, guys, the other day. Don't worry. I opened it and I opened it real well. It like popped right
Yeah,
off. I looked
good
at
for
my wife. I
you.
was like,
Good for
you
you.
really, yeah. That's
Yeah.
so funny. But it's
Husband
true though,
points right
right?
there.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
true though, right? Like what you're saying, like, and that's like my wife, like, I'm fully capable, right? Like, I'm fine, right? But like, I enjoy when she did something the other day like very similar where I was just like I was having a rough day and she just
Yeah.
chose she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this nice thing." And I'm gonna do this thing, take off your plate. And I was just like, it just feels so good, right? When someone
Yeah.
chooses to do that, right? To take
Yeah.
care of you, especially when you don't need it, right? Because then,
Right. Yeah.
like they could just say no. Like I've had partners in the past, right, where they're like, "Oh, no, I'm not," and I'm like, "Really? I could really abused you," like, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sometimes it's
No, you're
hard when
right.
you are a competent person, highly competent person, right, in whatever, right, or a certain field or myriad or whatever, right. You don't got your crap together. It just feels good that someone's there when
Yeah.
even if you don't need them, right, but still offering, So
Yeah.
I totally agree. But I could also see
Yeah.
where having, like really, looking at that type of dynamic would be really interesting, within the book and Magelight. But that's like what you said, like a magical
Yeah.
root feel. Like that's essentially what my friend was saying, and I was like, it really got me thinking, like of magic in a different way. So I think you got a lot of really
Yeah.
cool things here. All three of you ladies do, to be honest. So if anybody, we're
Thanks.
30, about 31 minutes in, so I just want to again say Feral Chaos Takeover because all three of you, are individuals and authors who really understand. I don't know if it's just the amicaffery influence or starting that route or what, but like but really like, there's a lot of, you guys have a lot of really cool character concepts and, really
Hmm.
just like make me think things differently, about, not just reading characters and analyzing them, but also like writing in particular. So for me, it's fun with
Yeah.
both the reading and the writing aspect, to really analyze that because I love to learn, so I just think it'd be really interesting, to talk to the three of you, together and really, talk about your guys's, processes and analyze a few things because
Yeah.
that's such a cool concept, particularly for a D&D party. And I like new
Yeah.
ideas. I like things, where people do that. So you guys are always saying something. I'm like, God, that's really cool. Like, why did I think of that? Like,
We
it's really neat.
are,
So,
I will say, as far as the feral ladies go, which is, me, Marisa, Wolf, Melissa Olthoff. As far as the three of us go, the three of us we are awesome in our own right. She said arrogantly, but the three of us together, we're so much more fun when it's all three of us,
I was so
and
bummed
in
that you
parts
had a
too, right?
thing. If I had known that, I would have moved it. Like
Oh,
to the night
oh,
before.
that's all right. Yeah.
We were
No,
like, oh
we
dang it. And they're like, she might get done in time. I was like, so that's why I was like, do you want to come? But it was so funny with you in the chat.
it was
Like it was
yeah.
absolutely hilarious. So it was really fun.
Yeah, no,
But it really like
we
kept
are
the
a lot of
party
fun
going.
together.
So
Yeah.
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 I'm really looking forward to it. I got to figure out
I
what
can't
like
wait.
questions, but yeah, that's actually what I'm doing this weekend. I actually just got this huge event done, and then our other one's planned for next week. That was what that phone call
Nice.
was before we got going. That was like another thing. So I got all my ducks in a row now next week. So
Nice.
I'm kind of excited, because now you know what I mean. Now I can be like, oh, I can plan this to be like a really
Hmm.
cool thing. Send you three, and we pick a really good date to do a really fun live, and figure out some sort of giveaway or something. I'm just like, I'm
Yeah.
actually really jazzed that I just got all this stuff done this week because now I could just like focus on the fun stuff I want to do.
Yeah.
Like Feral Chaos Takeover. But I'm really excited about Magelight. I already like have the book and everything, so I'm trying to
Yay,
figure
thank
out
you.
where I can. Yeah, I promised people that I was gonna read their stuff, and then I'm
Sure.
like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I
take
really
your
want to
time.
read these books. So, well, as I
Read
said,
it
I'm
when you can
sprinkling.
enjoy it. That's what I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah, yeah.
Read it
Well,
when
I'm
you can
using you
enjoy
guys
it.
as like
So
my palate cleanser for, for the summer. So I got you guys and
nice.
Zhao Wong in there. So my friend, he goes, I do not feel bad for you at all. Like I sent him Magelight, Rise from Ruin. I sent him a couple of Marisa's books I had already had. I was like, it's hard to pick. So he actually helped me pick that one for Valkyrie's Chosen. But yeah, so I was really, really excited about that. But
Good.
I'm excited for. I was telling him about the D&D party aspect, and he was like, "Oh my gosh,
Hmm.
this sounds amazing!" So I think I got him on board too, which would be really cool
Well,
to
I hope he
do
loves
like a
it.
buddy
Yeah.
read. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It'll be
Yeah,
awesome.
buddy reads are so fun, right? Like,
I just
oh,
have a better time with them. It's
yeah.
just I enjoy it more.
Yeah.
Getting like
So
that
it's
in-depth analysis.
it's kind of funny because when Marisa, Melissa, and I, when we're writing, when we're drafting, a lot of times what we'll end up doing is sending our in progress drafts to each other, sort of
Mm.
uh, like an alpha read situation, right? Like, I
Yeah.
hate does this work, or here it is. I also use them as an emergency like file backup. In
Oh,
case,
that's fair. That's fair.
in case my primary, secondary, and tertiary systems like fail me,
And
I
there.
can always be like, hey, can you send me back that draft because I have to recreate the entire freaking thing. Um,
Yeah,
so uh, so and that's a lot of fun too because it's almost like we're buddy reading each other's manuscripts as they're being written. So
yeah,
that's always been a good time because we are feral and unhinged in our comments and scream at each other and usually via text.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, our group chat is a mess.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm like really looking forward to being down with my first prequel novella. Now it's like probably gonna be a small book. I don't know. It's whatever, guys, at this point, but it's gonna
That's
be fun.
exciting.
But well, I have like Holly told me, and then Sarah both told me like you cut off the book at like the best time, but you suck. And I'm like, because I have this
Hmm.
amazing like character, and she's coming in. And they were like, "Why would you do that?" I go, "Do you want to read the next one?" They're like, "Yeah." I go, "Hers is the first chapter that you're gonna see
Hmm.
because she turned herself from like a really cool like like secondary character into she's like I'm a primary character and swore at me a bunch. So I was like, okay. And she's really tough, and even though my multiple black belts, I'm really scared of this hypothetical woman. Because my main character is scared of her. Like
Yeah, yeah,
she's in front of my main character. Like my other, my I should say now she's gonna kill me. My male lead, right? My other lead, right? Co-lead.
yeah.
Hope she doesn't destroy me in the night. But yeah. Alrighty. So, Casey, how did you go about the world building for this book, and what did you focus on the most?
So for Magelight, I knew that I wanted to have a roughly medieval-ish setting, very traditional fantasy with magic. But one of the things that I kind of asked myself is, okay, how does the presence of magic, how is it going to change things from the way things worked out in our in our timeline, in our historical timeline? And so in this particular novel, in this particular universe, what I decided is that so if you have the ability to wield magic, that's an advantage, right? And so the way that that really informed like the governmental structure of the empire in which these people live. So the way it shook out is that there are essentially 20 noble families who have, call it, the gene to do magic. And I don't really talk about this in the course of the story, but I had to know it, right? Like I had to figure it
Yeah.
out. And so magic then becomes the sole province of these families, of these noble families, who of course intermarry amongst themselves to keep it all under control, because we don't want the rabble having having access to
Of
magical
course
power,
not, right?
right? So how that ends up playing out is that again, you have a very stratified society of nobles and commoners, but it also, one of the, and this was something that kind of came out as I was writing. Like I didn't really go in planning this, but the nobility who have access to magic users and their abilities, they have access to things like healing magic, right? Commoners might not necessarily have that much access, but humans are incredibly resilient and what's the word I'm looking for? Ingenious, right? We come up with things, and so the way that ended up working out in this book is that I ended up basically saying that yes, there's magic, but even the magic users have a great respect for the science and the art of like herbalism and natural healing, because that's what everyone else gets to use, right? So in addition to these mages who are very powerful and well respected and recognizable because of the insignia and the clothing that they wear, there's also in just about every little village or town or city, well, lots in the city, there are also these people who, many of whom are women, who end up being wise women, right? Midwives and herbalists and potion makers and things like that, and that ends up being kind of the healthcare, if unless you're the kind of person who can afford to have access to magic. And so it was just sort of following those threads of logic, like, okay, well, if they don't have this, then how do they address this, right? And that was sort of the process for coming up with the world building. And I will say a lot of that, I'm really, really grateful to Toni Weisskopf, who is the publisher at Baen Books. She did a big developmental edit on Magelight for me when I first submitted it. And part of the reason I'm so grateful is that Tony is a very, very busy woman, and not everybody, I feel really honored that she took the time to do that in depth of
Awesome.
a dev edit on my
Yeah.
manuscript. But a lot of that was her prompting, her saying, okay, Casey, but why does this make sense in this world where magic exists? Why don't sorceresses usually have children? Like, what is the danger there? Why would why would herbal medicine be important? Things like that.
Yeah.
And it really did lead to a much better story and much more complete picture of the world building. Um, and a lot of it, like, I don't even I'm not a fan of the like data dump, right? I
Yeah.
don't I prefer to have kind of a closer view through my character's eyes. So unless my character has a reason to be thinking about it or learning about it, the audience may or may not ever see it. But it's important for me to know it, right? And
Yeah.
so that's kind of how I approached world building with Magelight. And I'm continuing to approach it right now as I'm working on book 2. So yeah.
Super cool. I didn't know you were doing a book too, so that's really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Makes
gonna be a
me
four
makes me
book
more excited
series.
now. Oh, that's awesome. I mean, don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. I'll read it like standalone. Like I'm Forgotten Realms guy, Dragonlance. Like
Sure.
I've read plenty of 1, 2, 17s, 35s, like I'll just read a book. Like I'm
Yeah.
okay with it. But that's super cool. I do like what you're saying though. Like there's so much stuff that I've talked about recently. Like I don't know anything about guns really, right? So I'm like using my friend Jared Wise to a great degree, and some
Yeah.
other my other friends, and I'm a bow guy, right? Like you
Hmm.
want to talk about bow,
Are
you want to talk
you?
about like yeah, you want to talk about bladed
We need to
weapons,
talk.
like you let me know. Yeah, you let me know.
Okay.
I'm trying to get recertified here so I can teach the kids here, but
Nice.
yeah, like bow's my thing. So there's so many times, right, where somebody will ask me and I'm like, yeah, and then my friend's like, well, I'm a gun guy. I'm like, ah, well, so like we chatted and did some different stuff together. That's like my friends are constantly on me. My D&D party, they're like, you've done martial arts for so long, so many. They're like, just do like a martial arts progression fantasy. So I'm like shutting them up by adding one of my urban fantasy Avengers, as I call them, the
Hmm.
Jade Sentinel. It's like gonna be this really cool, like yeah, dude with urban fantasy martial artist guy. Yeah, it's gonna be really cool. But I was like, okay, that's what I'm gonna do for now. But it's like, there's like always blind spots, right? So I keep thinking to myself lately, like, it's totally fine because I have them. So it's totally fine, right, that my characters do not know everything about this world. So
Yeah.
I don't know why that just clicked recently, like within the last couple of years, but it just like made more sense to me. So I've been better about not, just dumping. So I
Well, and
I think that's really great advice.
I had that experience. I had that sort of epiphany when I was writing my space opera series, which is also ongoing. It's the Ashes of Antisea series, and it's oh, okay. There we go. Uh, it's the Ashes of
Yeah.
Antisea series, and the main character is again a noblewoman, and she's riding on a starship, but she doesn't know how the starship drive works.
That makes
You
sense.
like it's like, well, I mean, I do, but most people when they go fly on an airplane, they don't necessarily know how a jet turbine engine works, right? It's
That's
like,
fair. Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
you just get on the airplane and the pilot
Most
does some
don't care,
stuff and then
right?
you
They
take
just want to
off,
get
right?
there.
And you don't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
It's not part of your
Yeah.
thought process.
Yeah.
So by writing the way that I do, where it's usually a pretty a pretty close, pretty limited POV. Unless my character is thinking about it, the reader doesn't get to read about it, So, which leads
Yeah.
to some interesting challenges because sometimes I need them to think about stuff so that I can tell
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
reader.
Yep. Yep. Why would you think that thing that I told you to think?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I have for sure used in the past the narrative device of, and she never after could understand why this thought popped into her head, but so,
I've been there many a times myself,
mhm.
so that to me that would make total sense, especially as a parent.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really awesome. That's awesome. And I know we talked a little bit, about, like what you focused on, in terms of like the group dynamic, and things. I still think that just is like really interesting. But one sub question kind of came up for me for earlier that I kind of want to ask now, just to touch on, so you
Yeah.
mentioned like the D&D party. So, I think like Snow White and the Huntsman, right, with like Chris Hemsworth, where he's just coming through. Talk about a guy that I would save me, right, from the Wicked Witch or whatever, like I'd be
I
like,
mean,
fine, let's
fair.
go. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm tired, man. I don't need to fight all the witches minions. Like let him do it. Put me over your
Yeah.
shoulder and let's go. Like I know I'd get there, right? I feel safe. So I'm curious, like, do you have like three huntsmen? Do they each have like kind of like their
Mm.
own specialty? I'm kind of curious
Hmm.
how you did the group dynamics, in terms of like you got a mage, but like who are kind of like our other, cast of characters, in terms of like a D&D or a, like a fantasy party perspective.
So Alis, like you said, is a caster. She's a mage. And the men are Romik, who is a warrior who has a background. Well, so Romik the warrior, Dane the forester, which is like a ranger, and then Vil, the thief rogue character, right? And one of the things that I did was I deliberately made the men about 10 years older than Alis, because I did want to juxtapose her naivete and like inexperience with the world with their competence and experience, because
Yeah.
they've been through some shit too, right? All three of them. So their backstory is that they all three grew up in the same tiny village in the mountains. And when they were 12, they were friends and they would play together. And when they were 12, they were out playing in the forest one day when bandits came and raided their village, killed everyone, and slaughtered all the livestock. So they came back from playing to a smoking ruin. All their families are dead. And they don't know what to do. They're in this isolated village. So they spend a night in the forest, in the cave where they had been playing, and they wake up in the morning, they're scared, they're children, they're 12 years old, they don't know what to do, and they get into an argument with each other, and then they get separated in the woods, and then they never see each other again for the next 20 years. And so different things happen to them that put them on these different career paths, if you will. So Romik he was, kind of a big burly boy. He was, used to working on farm chores and stuff like that. And he also had kind of a aggressive personality, right? Like he was the one who would stand up for the other boys if someone was messing with them. So he gets found by some unscrupulous folks who basically sell him through a series of transactions to a gladiator stable in one of the large cities to the south of the empire. And he grows up as an arena slave, fighting for his life in gladiatorial events. And his choice, as he puts it, his choice is get good or die. So he chooses to get good, and then he gets really good. And then he gets so good that he's able to buy his freedom. But once he's free, he has no other marketable skill, but he doesn't want to go back into the arena. So instead, he does the equivalent of enlisting in basically a mercenary company. If you're familiar with European history, there were these organizations called condottieres, out of I
That's
think I said
cool.
that wrong. I probably said it with a Spanish accent, but it's Italian. Operating out of Italy in like Renaissance, Italian times. And there were these
I
there
just
were
had a
these
kid
very
tell me
famous
about this.
yeah, there were these very famous
It's
mercenary
funny.
companies. And so
Yeah,
so
yeah.
he ends up working, enlisting essentially in one of the most famous ones of those, works his way up through the ranks, becomes a junior officer. But because his fellow officers, like, they know who he is and they're jealous of his fame and how much his men respect him, he's never really part of the brotherhood. He always sort of feels outcast, and so he ends up leaving when he hears from his old buddy Vil that he grew up with. Dane, the forester, when they got separated in the forest, he was actually found by a good man who was a part of the Imperial Forestry Service, which is they're like game wardens, right, for the Empire. And this man like adopts him and raises him as his own son, and actually fosters Dane into the organization as a forester, where Dane is, gets very good at what he does. But his problem is that the majority of the organization are these snobbish younger sons of the nobility and minor nobility, and he is not good enough for them because he was born in a village instead of, in a mansion somewhere. And so he is also ostracized, and he's got a little bit of a spiteful, like, he's a hothead, right? He's got a little bit of a temper. So he decides, well, screw you guys, I'm going to be better at you than everything. And he gets better than them at everything, and I know that this is pretty unrealistic, but I invoke the rule of cool for the whole split the arrow trope, right? So good enough to do that kind of thing, right? So
Yeah. Who doesn't love that? I just saw that in a
right.
competition. Like literally like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, a friend sent it to me. They're like, dude, check this out. I'm like, it was like some can't remember, but it was one of I can't remember if it was China or Japan now, and he sent to me. It was so cool though. I was like, no
Yeah.
way. He's like, check this out. With modern day like arrows, I'm like, this is
So it
wild.
is
Because my
possible.
it is, yeah. So I've seen it. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah, it was
Great.
crazy.
Great. Yeah. But that of course
He's been
doesn't solve his
research guy.
problem. That's right. That's right. Um, but that of course doesn't solve Dane's problem. They just hate him more. And so he also is about ready to burn shit down when he gets this letter, this mysterious letter in his gear from signed his old friend Vil, right? Vil has probably the most trauma in his backstory because once they get separated, he isn't found by anyone and he just wanders through the forest, you know, foraging for food until he makes his way to the edge of a town or a city, and he doesn't know where it is. But they've got a garden there, and so he's starving to death, so he steals from the garden and gets caught by the homeowner, who brings him in, feeds him, gives him a bath, drugs him, sells him to a brothel in the middle of the downtown. And when he wakes up, he's informed that he now has a choice. He can either be killed or he can perform the service that has been contracted. He chooses option 3 and stabs the client with the knife in the client's boot, and then escapes out the window with the client's
Fair.
purse.
Yep,
Lives on
it's
the
fair.
street for a couple of days until the money runs out, and then is reduced to begging when he gets basically beat up by the professional beggars who are part of the Thieves Guild for working their territory. He ends up being brought in front of the leader of the Thieves Guild, and being asked, "Were you the one who did this at this?" You know, and asked his story, and being asked, "Were you the one who killed, you know, so and so's asshole son at the brothel the other night or whatever?" And he didn't know anyone knew about that, but he admitted to it. And the leader of the Thieves Guild said, "Okay, we're square. They broke my rule about having underage workers at their brothel, and that can't go unpunished. So you don't owe me anything for that death, but you now once again have a choice. I can either have you killed, or you can join the family and, you know, come work for me." And he gets trained as like a second story cat burglar, right? And becomes a very sort of secretly famous, you know, notorious thief, I guess would be a good
And
word, in this city that is run basically by organized crime until he leaves. And we don't, at this point in the story, we don't know why he left, but he leaves and reaches out to his brothers and says, "Hey," because he through his connections in the underworld, he was able to track them down, and he was like, "Hey, I've got a proposition for you. Let's go into business for ourselves." And every time I think about that part of it, I imagine that scene from Ghostbusters where Bill Murray's like, "Call it fate, call it karma," you know. So, but that's basically what he does. And so they're meeting together, having this conversation, getting to know one another, deciding to join forces and be this you know, adventuring party together, when, you know, Romick goes outside because he's had too much beer and needs to relieve himself, and there's a girl getting chased on a horse running up to the inn, and so he takes care of it.
that's awesome. Super cool
Yeah.
cast of characters. So
Thanks. I
need
really
to
like them. They're a lot of fun.
need to get my 6 books finished really quickly here. Uh, I've been like doing Audible slash, so I'll do like 50% on Audible. Then I've been really good about like finishing the rest of my Kindle. But I have like 6 now, like 5 or 6. I'm just like I haven't had
Nice.
any time to really do Kindle, so I'm like trying to stick to it to, you know, still get the words into my
Yeah.
brain and stuff. But yeah, so
Well, it's
now
coming
I
out
have.
in audio, actually.
Oh, that's
So,
cool.
yeah, not till
Told me
September,
this.
but
Oh, I'll
yeah.
be done with it by then. I can't
Oh,
wait
okay.
now. I love the cast characters. I love fighters. Absolutely love Rangers. I'm a huge Rogue fan, so I'm
Oh,
just like
yeah, me
I'm
too.
already there. So, but I do look forward to just, you know, seeing how, you know, like you guys do the audio. I love when I've listened to, if I've only read a book, I've also really enjoyed like listening to it. I
Yeah,
always, you know, get that like I don't know. Sometimes you just get a, you know, really good experience the second time around. Just different, you know, especially with really
yeah,
good narrators. So I've like
yeah.
really been like really enjoying going back and, you know, listening to Audible for books that I read the last couple years that, you know, maybe they didn't coincide, but that's super cool.
Yeah, this one's being produced by Podium, and the narrator
Right.
is Jennifer Jill Araya, who is like she's won like Audio Awards. She's amazing, so she's super super
Okay.
good. And I've had her. I was kind of hoping for dual narration, because I do have chapters from the guy's point of view, but
Oh, okay. So I was gonna ask.
yeah, but Podium said no, we just want to go with Jennifer, which honestly is fine. I've she's done books of mine before that have male POV characters, and she does a really good job with male voices, even though she's a female
Sometimes, in
narrator.
my experience, again, not to be the guy that generalizes, but in my experience, sorry, fellas, but like women do a better job with male voices than vice versa.
Because it's
Unless you have a
easier to
really good
make your
narrator.
voice, yeah,
Yeah.
it's easier to
Yeah.
make your voice sound deeper without sounding
Yeah.
silly than it is to make it sound
Yeah.
higher
Yep.
without
Yeah.
sounding
Yeah.
silly.
No
Does that
offense
make
to anybody, but
sense?
that's what
Yeah,
I've noticed. So yeah, I'm
yeah.
like, okay. Yeah, it's really interesting. Again, you get somebody
And
like Travis who's just like
sure,
the
yeah,
goat at voices, you know. But yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting. Well, that's super cool. I look forward to that. I didn't realize
yeah. I'm
that
excited.
that's who it was, so I'm definitely gonna check that out. Because I did listen to totally blank, and I listened to a sample for you the other day, of one of yours. So I'm guessing that that's who did it. So I have to go back and take a look. You said she did a couple
It,
of yours then?
yeah, she did Minds of Men and The World Asunder. That was her. Um, Skies to Conquer, I think, was Aaron Bateman. And Aaron did all of the Ashes of Antisea
Oh,
books. Yeah.
okay. I was
And
thinking maybe
then,
that was it then. Okay.
yeah, Aaron's
Yeah.
also fantastic. Like, I've been
Yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
so,
That was
so
really good.
fortunate with all of the narrators that I've been privileged to work with. Even so, my lit RPG, Shadow Card Guardian, brand new narrator, by the name of Anna Delphine, and oh my goodness, she killed
Oh,
it. It was so
that's
good.
awesome. I
Yeah,
didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah.
That's super cool. Well, that's
So it
exciting.
was like her
I
second
forgot I got a
project
feather.
ever, but she was so
Yeah.
good.
I had heard that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's super cool. I keep forgetting I gotta get that one. I actually was. I keep trying to remind myself, but it keeps popping up for me at like the
Yeah.
worst time, like 2 days ago, right before my event and stuff. So thanks for reminding me to
Well,
have it today.
get it on audio, get it
Okay.
on Audible or audio,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I think you'll love it. Yeah.
Awesome. That's super cool. Which character do you think was the most challenging to write and why?
Alis. Alis because she's very young. She's just, she's in her
Mm,
early 20s and she's so insecure, and
mm,
so really broken. Like she just does not believe in herself. Which we've all been there, I think, at a certain point in time, but there
yeah,
were
yeah.
times when I needed her to be really weak for the story because, she starts weak and then grows. And there were
Yeah,
times
yeah.
when I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to hate her because she's so annoying.
Luke
Which,
Skywalker of A New Hope, right? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm happy with how it turned out, and it was a good. It worked well with the guys, right? Because the guys are, as I said, older, more experienced, real low tolerance for bullshit, right? So when she's like, "Oh, I can't," they're like, no, no apologizing. Either do it or don't do it, but don't apologize all the time for
Yeah.
something that's not your fault, right? Like that's one of the recurring conflicts that they have is that she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and like, "Why are you sorry?" Um, but you see that, right? Like I've seen that,
All
I've
the
done
time.
that in times
Yep.
when
All the time.
I've just been really like down on myself or whatever, and
Yep.
so it wasn't really fun to get in her headspace,
I bet. Yeah.
but it was challenging and it was a good experience in terms of like writing, but I don't know, it was more fun to be in the guys' heads and just be like, this girl. So
As a
yeah.
teacher that teaches ninth through 12th grade, I know that feeling often, no matter
Hmm.
what gender like it is, like
Hmm.
just teenagers or younger
Yeah.
kids. That was me yesterday at the start of my entire event. I'm just like, oh my gosh. Yeah, so I definitely understand. If you need to get in
Yeah.
anybody's head with that, just let me know. I have
I
plenty of
will.
notes on that area. So
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Yeah.
so try to figure out how to ask this question because I want it to be as like mysterious as possible to get people like me to, I was like, I gotta buy this book to just figure out what, you girls were talking about, what you ladies were talking about, about. So if you could pick one character from this book to go on a quest with, which one would you pick And then the second part, how much water would you in fact bring? And do you want to let us know, just without spoilers, like what's the deal with the water?
So what I love about romance novels in particular, and specifically why choose or reverse harem romance novels, is not necessarily the smut, although I've got nothing against some good smut in writing. And but there is no smut in Magelight, like there's no sex on the page, right? And I did that very deliberately. Um, but um but what really gets me is not the smut, it's the tension, right? It's that like that feeling of like, being this close to the person, so close, like you can feel them kind of inhaling, right? But are you
Yeah.
going to kiss or are you not going to kiss, right? Like that moment, okay?
Yeah.
um and so I wrote a lot of that into the story, particularly in the context of these guys are her bodyguards. They're protecting her, and there are people actively trying to hurt her. So there are scenes where they are physically shielding her, physically grabbing her, you know, um, you know, protecting her with their bodies, and lots of tension and all of that, because that's my jam, right? Like that's
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that's why we do what we do. so
Right.
so there's one particular scene, and the answer to your question, which character is Vil, and Vil is the rogue. And there's a one particular scene where they're setting up camp, and Alis is tasked to go get water, and Vil goes with her because somebody always has to be with her to watch her and make sure she's safe, right? And uh no, actually, no. I take it back. This isn't when she's tasked to go get water. She's going to get a drink of water herself. They're like in a cave, and they found like an underground spring lake thing. And so Vil's like, come here, and he lifts up a handful of water for her, and she drinks it, and that's all that happens.
Okay. All righty. So you got to buy the book to figure out the rest of the story. It's so
We
funny
call it the
because
sexiest drink of water.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because talking about tension, like I'm right like 60% in small favor with Dresden Files, that there is a
Uh-huh.
very tense moment between Harry and Lucio, and
Hmm.
oh my God, I like heard it yesterday, and I was like, dang, I was like, is it just hot outside or is it hot in this car right now?
Yeah,
I was like actually impressed because there's other times where he does a pretty good job, but I was like, I'm more of a Patricia Briggs guy if I want my tension,
yeah,
and I thought he did. I was like, wow, I was impressed. But it really made me think of when you guys were talking about that scene. So I just wanted to
yeah,
throw that out there for people because if you got to know, you got to know, So you
yeah.
got to go
Oh
buy the book.
yeah, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I know we're winding down on time here, Casey, but we always leave room at the end. Do you have any like other news updates, current projects, anything like that you can share with us at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So, current project is book two in the Mage Light series. It's tentatively titled Blood on the Sand.
Ooh, that's cool.
And thanks. And I am close to three-quarters of the way through the first draft. So, I'm really having a really good time writing that one. I do a lot more. I think I do a lot more like world building or
Mm,
explanation of the world building in that book. Um,
cool.
so so that's my current project. I will be at LibertyCon in Chattanooga, Tennessee, June 20th through the 22nd. So if you're going to be in the area, it is sold out. But if you're going to
Yeah.
be, yeah, if you're going to be there, come say hi. I will have a signing and a author's alley spot while I'm there for part of the time. And then I will also be at Lit RPG Con in Denver in mid July. So I'm super, super excited about that. I will have copies of um, Shadow Card Guardian and probably copies of Mage Light there to sell as well. So we'll see. And then in August, end of August, beginning of September, over Labor Day weekend, I will be at Dragon Con in Atlanta, Georgia, and partying with 80,000 of my closest friends in 5 hotels for a week. So really excited about that. That's always a really good time. So
We have so Liberty Con was sold out. I didn't know that. So next year, see you there. So I'll do that
yeah,
ahead
yeah,
of
yeah.
time.
Oh,
So I
it's
have
such
a
a great
list.
con.
So
Yeah.
And then Dragon Con, my friends are getting married that weekend. So
Oh, oh,
then
that's
the
sweet though.
following year, my mom's 70th. So she goes, you can go the year
Oh
after
wow.
that. Yeah. So Liberty Con's going to be on my list actually next year. So
It's a
yeah,
great
I'm
time.
really excited about that. So you're not the only one
Yeah.
person I know going. I was like, dang it. I just didn't know about it. So I actually thought it was
Yeah.
a different date. Actually, I got it screwed up with a different con. And I just feel
Uh,
so silly. My wife's like, you can go. I go, no, it's sold out. I was like, and then actually we had something at school get moved to that like Friday. So it just like was one of those things. But I'm really excited for
yeah.
next year though. 'Cause it's already on my calendar. I'm like got the newsletter and stuff, like waiting
Oh,
for
good.
them just
Yeah.
to double check the dates and stuff. Yeah. So that night
Yeah.
I missed a PAX too for school reasons, but next year I'm like
Yeah.
gonna be sick, so I'm really excited.
When
They're gonna be like, I
it's so
saw you all over
funny.
social media.
When I was on active duty, we would at one of my units, we would have certain events that would happen throughout the year that would require like max
Oh
participation,
yeah.
right? And at one point, they ended up being um, set over Labor Day weekend, and one of my commander at the time, like a couple minutes prior, was like, "Don't plan on taking leave this weekend," and I was like, "Sir, I already have it on the books," and he was like, "Fine, Casey's the only one who can take leave that weekend." Because every year I was like, Labor Day weekend, I'm putting in for leave because I will
Yeah,
be at
yeah, yeah.
DragonCon.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I asked my mom, I was like, "Do you want to do your birthday like in Atlanta?" She goes, "No, I'll go with you the next year and watch my grandson." I go, "Okay, so that's like that was our like
Sure,
compromise."
sure. Yeah, yeah.
That's really funny.
So,
Well, that's awesome. Well, I just want to remind everybody, you can go to the description anywhere where you are listening or watching to this podcast. You can find all of Casey's social and book links there. So please make sure you do that. We mentioned some other friends, Marisa Wolf, Melissa Oldup, so please make sure you go and check out my individual interviews with them as well as Kacey and Marisa's co-authored interview with me. Like I said, we had a really good time.
we did.
So if you guys have any questions for them, just let me know. I can pass them on. You can contact them through those book and social links in the description. Just want to remind everybody, please review any audio books, comic books, like whatever you're doing, right? Whoever we have, TV shows, we've had people with music that are coming on, I guess, some pretty cool stuff. So please make
Yeah.
sure, you're doing that. It just helps everybody. So Casey, thank you so much. I was really excited to be able
Thank
to
you for
have you on
having me.
today. Yeah,
Yeah.
anytime. You guys
So
are always
fun,
welcome.
man. So
I'm
fun.
really looking forward to it. So I'm actually emailing you guys tomorrow as soon as I get into town. Tonight we're gonna sleep and everything, and then tomorrow I'll
Nice.
be emailing the three of you to figure out, when we can do this Feral Chaos takeover. I am
I love
absolutely
it.
thrilled, so I can't wait. But other than that, I'm sure I'll talk to you, at some point this weekend on social media or email. But I hope you have a good rest of the night, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay.